So this lesson is over principal, interest, and commission. Now, it has been a longer lesson for us. It's been like 4 days. So I'm going to try to get this done in about the 10 to 12 minute time, but it might go slightly over because, again, it's been a lot. So when we're talking about interest, which is these first two questions for us, the interest formula is interest equals the principal times the interest rate as a decimal times the amount of years it has been in accruing this interest. So principal is how much money I start with at the beginning. So if I put $5,000 in my bank account, my principal is $5,000. Okay. So let's start by doing this top box. So again, interest equals, well, I don't know how much interest I have, so I'm going to put I equals. So interest is my principal, which in this case is $250. So 250 times my interest as a decimal. So to get your interest as a decimal, you take your percent. So in this case, it is 2%. And then I'm going to move my decimal point over 2 spots. So 1 spot, 2 spot, put a dot, and then I got to fill in that 0 there. So 2% of that as a decimal is 0.02. So I'm going to go 250 times 0.02 times 8 years. Now, if I put that in my calculator, because my variable is already by itself, so I can just go 250 times 0.02 times 8. That is going to get me $40. Now, that's how much interest I earned. That means my principal plus my interest, which is now how much I actually have in my bank account, would be $290. The second one, we're missing the interest one again, so it's going to be the exact same way. So interest equals, and then my principal. So I started off with $340, multiply that by 5%. So if I do this again, 5%, move it over twice, 0.5, or 0.05, my bad, times the 2 years that it is in there. Again, put in a calculator, 340 times 0.05 times 2. That is going to get you $34. So $34, which means $340 plus $34 means now I have $374 in my bank account. Now, these next two we're doing are a little bit different because we're given the interest. So I know what I is, but I don't know a couple other factors. So we're going to have to solve it a little bit differently, but we're going to set it up the same way. So instead of I equals, I know my interest is $30. I know over the course of this, I earned $30. This time, I don't know my principal. So P times 4% as a decimal is 0.04 times 3. Now, to solve this, I need to get P by itself. So for this problem here, whatever's happening between the P and the 0.04, which is multiplication, because it's P times 0.04, I do the opposite of that. So now instead of multiplying by 0.04, I'm going to divide by 0.04 on both sides of the equation. 30 times 0.04 gets me 750 equals P times 3. And then again, P times 3, so now I need to do the opposite because I need to get that P by itself. So 750 divided by 3 gets me the principal equals $250. So I can say $250 was my beginning. So 250 plus 30 means that now I have $280 in this bank account. And then our final one, our interest is $109, so I earn $109.44 over the course of this. My principal is $456 times 0.06 times the time, which we don't know yet. So now I just need to start dividing. So whatever's happening between the t and the 0.06, which is multiplication. So I'm going to divide by 0.06 on both sides. When I go 109 divided by 0.06, I get 1,824 equals 456 times t. Now, again, what's happening between the t and the 456? Multiplication. I need to do the opposite of that. So I'm going to divide by 456 on both sides, which t equals 1,824 divided by 456 equals 4, which means that the term of this interest loan or interest rate was 4 years. Now, these four up here were where we put money into a bank and the bank was giving us interest. So we were gaining money. But now we have to look at if I borrow money and now I have to pay interest. Okay? So again, it's going to be the same exact equation. It's going to be my interest equals the principal, or in this case, it's now going to be borrowed amount, times the interest as a percent or as a decimal, times the time in years. Same exact thing. So now I don't know how much interest I'm going to be paying. So I'm going to put interest equals. Now how much I borrowed $1,500. Multiply that by 7 as a decimal. So 7% as a decimal is 0.07 times the term of this, which is 3 years. Okay, I can put this one in my calculator. So when I put this in my calculator, I'm going to be having to pay $315 in interest. Now, when you're paying back interest, you have to pay back the amount you borrowed plus your interest. So what I need to pay back in total is $1,815. Now for this next one, we're missing how much we borrowed. So we're going to be figuring out how much I borrowed, but I do know how much interest I have to pay back. So that's going to help us. So I'm going to be doing the interest that I borrowed, or the interest that I'm paying, which is $7,200. We're going to scoot that over because it's going to take up a lot of space. So $7,200 equals the amount I borrowed. So I'm going to keep using P because that's what we've been using. Times 2 as a decimal. So 2% as a decimal is 0.02. Times how long this is, which is 20. Now when I'm looking at this, what is happening between the P and the 0.02? That is multiplication. So I'm going to divide by 0.02 on both sides my equal sign. 7,200 divided by 0.02 is 360,000. That is still going to equal P times 20. Now, what's happening between the P and the 20? Because again, I have to get this variable by itself. Multiplication. So that means I need to divide by 20 on both sides. P equals 18,000. So that means I borrowed 18,000. But that means in total, I need to pay back 18,000 plus 7,200, which comes to $25,200. Now it says Gourmet Eatery has a policy of automatically adding an 18% tip to every restaurant bill. So they're adding 18% to every restaurant bill as a tip. We need to start off by writing an equation to represent the relationship between tip, which is represented by T, and the restaurant bill, which is represented by B. So this equation, we've used it several times. It's going to look like Y equals KX, where K is our constant, Y is our Y variable, and X is our X variable. So we need to make this equation using our variables and our constant. So how this is saying it is we have a relationship between tip and restaurant. So since this comes first, it's going to be our Y, B is going to be our X. So we have T equals, now our constant in this is going to be 18% because that is added to every single tip. It stays consistent for every single bill. So I need to write this as a decimal. So 18% as a decimal, I move it over 2 spaces, is 0.18. So tip is equals 0.18 times whatever my X is, which would be my total bill. So this is going to be the equation that we have to use. Now, the next question, it says, how much of a tip does the restaurant add to a restaurant bill of $54? So when I'm doing this, I'm going to use my equation. I need to figure out, well, it says the restaurant bill is $54. Does T represent restaurant bill or does B represent restaurant bill? If we look, the tip is represented by T, the bill is represented by B. So since the restaurant bill is $54, I'm going to just plug that in to where the B is. So now I'm going to use the same exact equation. Tip, which I don't have yet, equals constant, never changes, times 54, because that is my bill. When I multiply those together, I go 0.18 times 54. My tip is going to be $9.72. The second part, it says Marie receives a tip of $12. How much is the restaurant bill? So this time we're dealing with tip. Again, our equation is T equals 0.18 times B. So T equals 0.18 times B. Now I just plug stuff in. Do I know the tip? Yeah, it says the tip is $12. So 12 equals 0.18 times B. I don't know B yet. But now I need to get B by itself because that's the variable. So what's happening between the 0.18 and the B? Multiplication is an imaginary operation, meaning there's not always going to be a sign there. So 0.18 and B, they're smushed together, which means multiplication. So I need to do the opposite of that. So I need to divide by 0.18 on both sides. And then I'll get B equals, and then when I do 12 divided by 0.18, I get $2.16. Crap, nope, that was the bill. So I need to do the bill. So $12 divided by 0.18 gives me the bill of $66.67. That is my bad. So when I do 12 divided by 0.18, I get $66.67 as my total bill. Now, for the final question, it says if a restaurant bill is $12, so the bill is $12, how much is the tip? So again, we're going to start, my equation is T equals 0.18 times B. I know the bill this time, the bill is $12. I don't know the tip. Constant stays the same. Bill is $12. So 0.18 times 12, my tip is going to be $2.16. That's where I got the $2.16 last time. So my tip for this one is $2.16. These, once you find the equation, it's just plug and chug. Plug the information in and solve. So get the variable by itself and you will be good. All right, final part in this. Final part of this video. It's a couple questions. So I know that Ariana has a budget that breaks down her monthly income as follows: 25% for housing, 15% for food, 20% for transportation, 10% for savings, 8% for entertainment, 22% for personal items, and she makes $3,200 a month. Okay, so we're going to be flipping back and forth a little bit to get some of this information back. So it says calculate the amount of money Ariana has each month for her essential budget items. So her housing, her food, and transportation. So I'm going to start by writing up here, she makes $3,200 a month. Just so I know that's going to be needed throughout this whole thing. Now, housing, food, and transportation. Housing is 25, food is 15, transportation is 20. So 25, 15, 20. So let's go back to that. 25%, 15%, and then 20%. Perfect. Okay, so now we have the information we need to be able to solve this. It says calculate the amount of money Ariana has each month for her essential budget items. So to figure this out, we need to turn a dollar value. We need to get a dollar value for a percent. So to do that, I turn the percent to a decimal. So 25% as a decimal is 0.25. So I'm going to take 0.25. And then I'm going to multiply that by her monthly income, which is $3,200. This will tell me the dollar amount that is 25% of this income. So 25% of $3,200 is $800. So that means she can spend $800 on housing. When I do this for food, I'm going to do the same thing. Move it over. Now I have 0.15 times 3,200 because, again, I want to know what 15% of 3,200 is. So to figure that out, I take the decimal times the total monthly budget. 0.15 times 3,200 is $480. And then finally, her last one is 20%. 20% as a decimal is 0.20. So 0.20. We're going to multiply that by the 3,200. And when we do that, we get $640. So that means she can spend $800 on housing. She can spend $480 on food. And then she can spend $640 on her transportation. Now, it says last month, for question 2, it says last month, Ariana spent $525 on food and $250 on entertainment. It wants to know what percent of her monthly income did she spend on these items. So to get this to be a percent, it's like when we have a test. So when you have a test and you get a 37 out of 50, to get this into a percent, you go 37 divided by 50, and then we just move the decimal point. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. So if she spends $525 on food out of her total $3,200, so this is like if I had a test, I got 525 questions right out of 3,200 questions. Okay, I would do 525 divided by 3,200, which gets me 0.164. So 0.164. Now to turn this into a percent, I need to move it 2 spaces to the right. I need to move my decimal point 2 spaces to the right, which means that this is 16.4%. So she spent 16.4% of her monthly income on food. On entertainment, we're going to do the same exact thing. So 250 over her total of 3,200. When I divide those, I go 250 divided by 3,200. I get 0.78. Or I keep messing up on that. It's 0.078. When I move my decimal point 2 spaces to the right, right there, I know that this is now 7.8%. So she spent 7.8% of her monthly income on entertainment. Okay, so when I'm turning my, we're just going to quickly refresh this. When I am turning my percent into a dollar amount, I take the percent as a decimal, multiply it by the total amount allotted. So in this case, it was 0.25 times 3,200. When I want to turn my dollar amount into a percent, I divide how much I spent over my total amount allotted, and then it'll give me a percent that I have to just transfer. So again, it's like a test. If you got 37 out of 50, you do 37 divided by 50, and you would get your percent on that test. Okay? Now, final question. It says Ariana is planning to move into a new apartment that costs $1,000 per month. So it's $1,000 per month. What must her monthly net income be to keep housing at 25% of her budget? Well, I know here I can set up a proportion because it gives me 3 pieces of information. And for a proportion, if it gives me 3 pieces of information and I'm looking for a 4th, I can easily solve this. So it says Ariana is planning to move into a new apartment. It costs her $1,000 a month. That's one piece of information. What must her monthly net income be to keep housing at 25% of her budget? So I also know 25%, which in a proportion, if I wanted to make 25% into a fraction, it's the number over 100. Okay, so when I'm doing this, I know the percent is 25 over 100, which is 25%, equals, now I need to figure out where I want this $1,000 per month to be. It's either going to be on the top or the bottom. When we're doing this, the top is a part. It's the part. And then the bottom is a whole. So is the $1,000 a month part of her budget, or is it her whole budget? It's part of her budget. So the $1,000 is going on the top because we want to figure out what her whole budget needs to start being. So to figure that out, I'm putting X. Now, to solve a proportion, we cross multiply and divide. So cross multiply, divide. So 100 times 1,000 divided by 25. When I do that, it is going to get me, it's going to be X equals $4,000. So that means for her budget to stay fine and for housing to stay at 25% of her budget, she needs to start making $4,000 instead of $3,200.